Hello, and it really is wonderful to welcome you to another OAG Public Sector Audit Committee Chair Forum. Fantastic that you could join us in person. I think parking may be a bit of an issue. We had a few extra RSVPs. I think we've got about 40 online, so a great number to share some insights, both from our guest speaker, who I'll introduce momentarily, but also some things that we've been doing and seeing from our office's perspective. But really wonderful to have you here. Welcome you here to Albert Facey House, the home of the OAG and other integrity agencies. And just outside here is a traditional meeting place of the Whadjuk Noongar people, and so we continue that tradition today. Let me introduce really what we're going to do today. So if you haven't joined us before, these are opportunities for us to come together. For those of us interested in audit and governance stuff in the public sector. Many of us have other hats that we wear from our day jobs or the jobs that you hear today. But what you'll find is a deep commitment and dedication to serving our community. And you'll see that particularly from our guest speaker today. And look, we just hope you find this useful. I said when I started this a few years ago that we would continue doing this for as long as you find it useful. And so your feedback, which I'll share some of it on the audits generally at the end of today's session, but your feedback is really valuable. So let me introduce to you our guest speaker, Elizabeth Carr. So for those of you who don't know Elizabeth, she has really deep experience across public and private sectors. So she's been a senior exec with Macquarie, IBM, and senior positions in government here in WA, New South Wales and internationally. She currently holds a portfolio of board positions now, both as well as audit committee, risk committee chairs, again here in WA, New South Wales, a range of roles which she can touch on telling you some of those. But look, her expertise is around sort of high risk, high scrutiny environments. And when I saw Elizabeth appointed to the Amana Living board as chair, or stepping into the chair role some months ago, I sent her a quick note to congratulate her and immediately asked her if she'd like to speak at this forum, because I thought, you know, those of us involved in governing or auditing the health system or using it, and where do people go often after being in the health system? It's the aged care system. Where do some of the other roles that Elizabeth has around education, around other sectors, energy, and a range of things, which actually, Elizabeth, you can touch on specifically, because I can't remember if they're current or past, and you may or may not want to remember some of them. But what I thought was so unique from Elizabeth's perspective is being able to weave for us the dots. And I know she's keen to use examples from outside WA just to deflate sort of some of the contentious issues that we can all get involved in when we know too much about them. But her ability to join things up, I think you'll see, is really evident, but also feel free to probe and bring that out in the Q&A that we'll have shortly. So let me hand over to Elizabeth, and there'll be an opportunity, as I say, for Q&A, and then I'll give you some observations and insights from what we're doing in our office. But again, hopefully you find this useful and can stay to join us for some refreshments afterwards.
Well, thank you, Carolyn, for the invitation and the introduction, and also thank you to Laura for all of your assistance. Now, I've just returned from trekking with the orangutans in North Sumatra. It was amazing, by the way. Now, I'm only mentioning it. I have no reflections from it. I'm merely mentioning it in case this speech is so boring that at the end in our get-togethers we've at least got an interesting topic or conversation to talk about, which is the orangutans. Look, Laura suggested what might be an interesting topic is just to talk about my view of the role of audit and risk committees, particularly in entities that are under scrutiny and then beyond. And, you know, you might agree with my observations or you might not. That'll make for a good conversation. I would ask that we respect the Chatham House rule, as I am going to mention some organisations by name. And for complete transparency, I currently chair the Audit and Risk for the CCC. But just to give you great confidence, those juicy matters that you send through to the CCC or your organisation sends through to the CCC, I don't get to see those. So now, as background, as Carolyn was saying, I've sat and chaired on ARCs for state government in New South Wales and WA, for NFPs, small and large, for organisations in metro and regional, in international organisations, private companies, probably across about 11 industries. Some run smoothly, some do not. But my key learning and reflection from those experiences are actually quite similar in that we spend every meeting talking about, we all have the buzzwords. We talk about assurances around the systems and the processes, and do we have the effective controls, and do we have our right mitigations and risk strategies important. Now, all of that's really important. All those words and documents are really important and helpful. But the wild card, look, it's actually all to do with people. And in each of the cases I'm going to mention today, it was one person in a position of power and influence that was the rotten apple. And they were able to use the systems, the processes, the controls to their advantage. So what do? Do we just throw our hands up and say, well, what's the point? Or can we potentially look at our role slightly differently? So I think, of course, we need the systems, process, controls, frameworks, all of those to be in place to help those who are doing the right things, to help them. And then for auditors and ARCs, we're not necessarily going to be the ones to find fraud, but once the fraud is found, it's how we act upon it that's our moral compass. So I keep coming back to that sense of people, our roles, and how we can bring that forward in our conversations. So my philosophical position is that our role has a really strong EQ component. So as we set the agenda and we sit around the table, I have about 4 things that I keep in mind. One, that the CEO or DG's role is the hardest and toughest, and it's the loneliest. So are we protecting them and the purpose of the organisation, or are we just creating work? The second is our role is to create a culture around the table where those gnarly issues can be brought forward in a safe environment for genuine discussion. The third is it's then a privilege to meet, probably 4 times a year for an audit and risk. However, we don't live and breathe the business as the executives do. So our distance allows us to listen, to ask the questions of value, and to test assumptions. We're there trying to hear what others who are deep in the woods can't necessarily hear. And these different conversations with independents coming through may help the good people observe where there might be gaps. And then the fourth is people just don't want to come to meetings to get told off. They don't want to be growled at. They don't want to be smacked. They don't want to be pontificated at. So I try to have this sense of culture that we minute observations rather than dictating actions. So now just a couple of observations. So an observation from the one I was going to talk, Department of Education in New South Wales, and in particular their school infrastructure business. Now I became chair after the matter was referred to ICAC. In essence, the issue was, there's going to be no guesses for this, contract management, both in terms of contingent labour on the projects and the awarding of the third-party contracts. So ICAC has now handed down its findings, and the good news for us is that there's no gotchas in the recommendations because, I think it helps, there's a new secretary, there's a new head of schools infrastructure and a new ARC chair. So we could take the process seriously without emotion and just create the right speed and thoughtfulness around those recommendations. But I think it was our sense of immediate ownership We said, absolutely, if these are the recommendations, then this is the recommendations. We own it, we run with it, we talk it through. And then that takes away a number of other pressures that might come. But one of the things that actually stood out was the repeated ICAC observation that the gentleman in question, heading school infrastructure, did not attend ARC meetings, did not respond to requests from the previous ARC, sent low-level staff to meetings who took every question on notice. Internal audit was met with resistance, which reduced their ability to examine, and he publicly ridiculed measures around mitigation and control. Well, red flags indeed. But if a waterfall begins with but one drop, these individual issues weren't actually escalated in a way that they could be observed as a whole. So it's only as I read through all of those, you're going, that's an issue, but one in itself may not have got there. An interesting quote from ICAC report, moreover, the Commission couldn't locate evidence that the ARC was advised that X's decision to change the accounting treatment of capitalised expenditure in relation to the payment of workers or contractors from school funding projects. Had the ARC known about this, it might have sought clarification. Right? So to give you a sense of scale, there were individuals on contingent labour within the department invoicing for themselves close to $1 million a year. So the role of the ARC to be thoughtful, inquisitive, and to create a space to tie the bows is clearly highlighted there through those recommendations. So I often therefore think it's not that these endless reports on systems and processes and reports are important in our role, is that they are a tool to ask different questions that wouldn't necessarily being asked through a management lens. So, interestingly, this behaviour of disrespect for audit, for actively involving completing due process tasks, was the same criticism levelled against Paul White in the WA case. When Michelle Andrews started to suspect something was not smelling right, she told him she was establishing an ARC. And his reaction was, why would you want to expose yourself like that? Again, it's just these nuances of moments, of comments, and how you can take from there. So for me, the number one takeaway from all of my examples is really about EQ. I try to observe what I am and am not being presented in papers and in person, who's taking the process seriously or not, who might be obfuscating towards homework tick boxes, and who's genuinely curious. I think that most people, I know, most people are good and honest. So it's not every organisation that's going to have this rotten apple or these difficulties, but we should assume there's one and ask them in the questions to pull it out. So back to New South Wales Department of Education and what we're doing with the findings. So just like Communities WA, we actually need to work our way through establishing trust in the processes, in the systems, in risk management, so that the good people once again have the right guardrails to do the role effectively. So what we've tried to do there is we've allocated for a 12-month period a quarter of every ARC, so an hour of every ARC, to go into a deep dive into schools infrastructure, which actually goes broader across the department, but we can use it for this section. And then we've picked a number of gnarly issues to break down and examine. And then what we try to do is bring not just school infrastructure people, but support people, the IT, the finance, the people group, into the room together, so that the conversations are broader and we can hear it more thoughtfully how it might be implemented. And I try to use this tool of collaborative discussions, because remember, we're only there 4 times a year. So how do we use it for really genuine conversations? So I try to have these collaborative conversations. So if you take an example, you can bring an IT person in to discuss cyber or AI, and he or she can provide a really good technical answer. But if you combine that with, say, the Deputy Secretary of Schools and their team with the IT framework to see how it's affecting NAPLAN and exam processes, you get a very different outcome about what AI and cyber is about rather than just a framework. Or I often think too, if you're trying to discuss things like cultural issues, why don't we all bring together the leads of performance management, WHS and recruitment and retention and IT systems, bring all of these different people together rather than just hearing the story of WHS on its own as an example. And then you start to break down some silos. But with all of these processes in place, I'm once again reminded that individuals who want to do the wrong thing can use the systems in their favour. Now, I thought that the CFO of a New South Wales private company was just not very smart. Turns out he was extraordinarily smart, just not for good. So when I came on the board and I said, I'm really surprised about how little surplus we make, and was told, oh, this is a tough business to make surpluses. Yeah, no. So after getting support from new board members, we did a whole bunch of the classic things, We started to look at the budget line item by line item. We started to look at ensuring that leave was taken appropriately. We requested changes of delegations of authority to understand where that might be leading. We changed auditors to see whether that, but just nothing came to light. Until he and the CEO retired at the same time. Now, the CEO was not involved, but I don't think she really trusted the board. So therefore, subconsciously, she was enabling him. So what we found out once they'd retired was that he was taking nearly $400,000 a year for the business for about the last 10 years. So, in my view, if my takeaway from that one was, we did not create a safe space that the CEO could reflect, and we did not apply thoughtful questioning. So we were doing the hard line, this doesn't feel right, so that just got people defensive, and therefore it could be hidden. So again, I come back to this sense of culture of how you can try to get a sense of what might be happening. So I think it's often too easy, I'm nearing to the end, you please know, it's too easy to have a formula for agendas and papers. We need to be adaptable. I want to paint a picture of one organisation that was in crisis, but not because of mismanagement. So imagine being the CEO of the Murrumbidgee Local Health District. This is in southern New South Wales. So from January 2020 to around December of 2023, she experienced in her district, not necessarily in this order, extreme drought, life-destroying fires, including her own property, locust plague, mice plague, imagine trying to work clinical governance in small hospital posts with locusts and mice. She had the Japanese encephalitis virus come through. She also had that other pesky virus called COVID. She was regional through COVID and right on the Victorian border. And the ARC couldn't meet in person for more than 2 years. So we needed to therefore change our focus on what was important against the strategy and these new government expectations. We couldn't just do the normal calendar as usual. And so we could have, I think, easily moved into solution mode or admiring the problem mode, but I felt it was important to try to stress test the frameworks that we had and see if they were truly working for us in these various environments. And then that gave the CEO and the team the guardrails that they could use as they were going through their business. So, look, in conclusion, I guess, advice was given to me at the start of my career that auditors are your friend. They are here to help and they're to test, to have a different view. Now, their recommendations most likely are helpful. Sometimes they're not, because they come with their own experiences and biases, just like we come with our biases. So their view of risk of whether it's qualified, significant, moderate may differ from our perspective. But how do we use those exit meetings to not be combative, but to, on both sides, be reflective and see that we both have the organisation at the heart, and there's not going to be unintended consequences. We are, after all, whether we are ARC members, auditors, ICAC, CCC, we are jigsaw pieces, I think, and where our role is to guide the DG to meeting their obligations, to deliver on government election promises, and to be assured that taxpayers' funds are being spent appropriately. We can't do that if we pontificate and we think we're the smartest people in the room. We can only do that if we are trying to draw out conversations. So I'm conscious, and I would leave it at this, that there are a number of new chairs here today, and my advice is to have the confidence to not get caught in the weeds, to not get caught up in procedural matters, but to keep your focus on listening, asking questions of value, and testing the assumptions. To review the papers, not as a manager, because they've got the management meetings doing that, but as a governor of a system, and keeping the purpose of the organisation at the heart of all that you do. I know as I look around the room, there's lots of experienced chairs here who would love to have a good chat. So please, if you are new, please feel free to reach out. So thank you for the opportunity to meet today. I look forward to discussing this further, but I'm probably more interested in talking about the orangutans. So thank you. Thank you.
Elizabeth, that's fabulous, but you're not allowed to go yet. We've got questions for you. And Laura has a mic, and also I think Nikki's going to manage the online questions, so feel free to ask Elizabeth anything you'd like. Come on. Don't.
No, you can answer it better than me.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Whoa. So Erica Haddon, I chair ERA WA at the moment, Audit and Risk Committee, sorry, not the chair of the ERA. Don't know myself. So Elizabeth, you talked about Paul White being resistant to the establishment of an Audit and Risk Committee. You spoke about organisations that didn't participate, didn't turn up. What about where they do turn up and they are really good, and you've engaged and you've done an internal audit, and the internal audit comes back with lots of red flags because there's lots of areas for improvement, where the defensiveness doesn't come from a place of we've done something wrong, it comes from a place of absolute terror and fear that the minister's going to see that report, and the reactions come from a different way. So have you got some suggestions on managing that process? Thanks.
Oh, look, thanks, Erica. I'm not sure that I have quite the right answers, and I'd be interested in others, but it does go back to this idea that we are a part of a large ecosystem and we all have that role to play. So internal audit might come back with a number of recommendations, but they need to understand what the consequences of that. The audit office comes with some, and then they're the right ones, but there are consequences to that. There's a couple of places where they'll feel they'll get smacked. It's either through management or the ARC or the minister. The reverse of that is that they think they've genuinely been doing a good job, and then they think, well, what was the point? So I think that it's this creating of a safe space to understand what are the battles and what are the wars and how you're going to prioritise those, and then to have the confidence through the DG, and I have to say all the DGs I work with are fantastic, providing them with the right resources to get that fixed. I think. Thank you. Lovely question. Right.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. You mentioned about don't get too tied up in the process. I sort of have a differing view on that, because I think the process is the structure that keeps the integrity of the organisation. So when we don't comply with process and the senior person, the rotten apple as you wish, gets out of control. So I would support compliance with process.
If I said particularly process, I said don't get caught up in the weeds. That sense of we can have the checklist of everything we must do, but what's the right bit of that checklist for this organisation? So you're absolutely right. I agree with you that the guardrails help the good people do their right job. Where it stifles them is if we keep the guardrails so tight and precise and everything has to be included within it. So if we think about what's happening now, and I think this is quite helpful, I'm seeing it more in New South Wales, but coming here as well, climate change reporting. So this is really interesting and new and important, but if we had the same amount of reporting for a Department of Education as well as a small fund, we would drive over. We should have different reporting for transport, who's actually driving more of some of that climate than maybe some of the other areas around communities, for instance. So I think it's trying to understand what's within those processes and what best suits your organisation. That's what I was trying to get to at the end. Lovely. Thank you. Thanks for the question.
I wanted to endorse your comment about red flags. We had a situation with a particular individual, Deputy DG, who became a very close friend of Colin's in another context, who was avoiding ARC, removing stuff from the risk register, not turning up, not even sending deputies. And the whole half of the organisation was kind of absent. Yeah. And it turned out, as that was probed in other forums, that his behaviour was particularly bad. So I think your little summary of behaviours around red flags matches the experience that we had as well.
Yeah, and it's what do we then do? Because if they don't turn up once, is that just timing? Is it how many times? And there's your judgment comes through. And how do you ask for others to come? And if you force some of that, then they know the systems and processes and they're going to obfuscate around it. So how you get a variety of people to own it, I think that's a great point.
Something on that. We're all experienced here in governance and audit and as Elizabeth said, most people want to do the right thing, but occasionally you encounter a person who doesn't quite fit within that normal bell curve of predictable behaviour for someone at a certain level or in a certain role, whether it be their interpersonal interactions or their defensiveness or outright aggressiveness towards scrutiny. And those things should raise really clear red flags. So what do you do with them? Something I said to our contract audit firms yesterday at the briefing where we invite them all in and we talk to them about priorities, issues for the season and all gee each other up to work together for another, what we hope will be a smooth one and really is. But we're optimistic this year. But, I said to them, we have within our new forensic audit function a great intelligence function that we're starting to build and get a picture where we're bringing in not just the formal management letter findings, but also the PIDs and referrals we get. And we've established really good relationships at the officer level and the senior levels, obviously, but with CCC and Public Sector Commission and even with the financial crime guys at WAPOL under that new forensic audit function. So I would ask that even if it doesn't reach the threshold of something reportable under anything related to PIDs, and you want to, have a waterside, you want to call a conversation with the auditors, or you just want to ring our office on any means or contact and ask to speak to someone, but your engagement leader from a financial audit sense, and just say, look, I've encountered some strange behaviour, describe it, and it may lead nothing, but if we can get those multiple points, and Elizabeth said it, there was no means of filtering up those observations and looking at those behaviours in a holistic way, we build that. And so we've had matters referred to us, or we've had, anomalies in finances where when our forensic guys speak to CCC about referrals or speak to PSC about conduct, about people or with an entity or an area in an entity, we will build a picture. And that's starting to yield results. So that is really valuable. That's something that we can do in our role as auditor of the whole sector, the whole public sector, which, an individual audit firm in a private sector entity, you don't necessarily have that luxury. You can still talk to them, and I would encourage you, if you're on private boards, to do so, definitely. But this is something pretty new in WA public sector, and I'm starting to get a picture of it getting really valuable in a number of ways. So,
Lovely.
Yeah, we've just got one online from Tyler Sudovic. What are the first signals you look for when assessing governance and risk maturity as a new audit and risk chair? And how do you avoid forming either premature confidence or unnecessary scepticism in the early stages?
No idea how to answer that at all. I'm going to tell you, that is so hard. Because it will be different in different organisations. If they're mature, you're going to be looking at issues at a different level. I feel if you want to get in touch and we have a more one-on-one conversation, I'd be happy to do that with you. But I do think it's that sense of place of understanding you are there to protect the purpose of the organisation. In government ones, we're also there to protect the spending of taxpayers' money and the services that there are to be delivered. So if we keep that focused and then try to test, are the issues coming up homework front office stuff, homework back office things, or are they about people out there doing the right things with their clients? So I'm going to give a slightly different example. This was given to me by Michael Coates-Trott, who's currently Secretary of Premiers in New South Wales, but he was Secretary of Communities. And he gave this story of this social worker needing to go to a home. She would go to a home, but it was such a terrible environment. She would have to go via the police station first to ask whether the gentleman of the family was at home. She went, no, it was fine, he was in jail. Good, so she could go to the home. Well, she gets there, she finds the mother overdosed on the floor. She then finds that the 3 children, 6, 3 and 1, are in the bath. She does all of the right checklist things. She calls, she gets everything. She's getting the ambulance in for the mother. She's doing all the right thing. And then somebody said, have you taken the children out of the bath? No, she hadn't, because she was so trained on checklists that wasn't on it, because it wasn't. So and it's the same thing with how do we question and do things in order risk. If we do it by a checklist, if we do it by too much structure, then we're not looking outside. So back to the question online, it would be about trying to test out of the box with the purpose of the organisation at the heart of what you're questioning. Thank you.
Hi, Elizabeth. I'm Brad Pearce.
We've worked together, another one.
You know who I am. Just a question. So we always focus on the train wrecks and the bad news stories and that. Where's an example of a committee that you've worked with that's had a real impact, and what was it, and what was the outcome?
We do, but I hadn't been thinking about that. That's, I do have one, and I had one before, and now I just can't think of it, Brad. We're going to have to talk about that in the networking group. If it comes back. Let's see. That's a good question, and I should have had it on the tip of my tongue, and I don't.
You're clearly not enough of a self-promoter.
I was clearly trying to work out on the difficult ones. Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Let's thank Elizabeth. That really was fantastic, Elizabeth, and I know that some of you may have further questions for Elizabeth, and she'll get back to us on the successes to put on that CV, it's such a lovely opportunity to hear from senior leaders, practitioners in the space. So, Elizabeth, thank you very much. I also love it, as you know, when people come and get up at this lectern in this forum and praise auditors as auditors being your friend. But I did take note of the bias. the potential bias, but also the recommendations sometimes not always being practical. May I encourage all of you to encourage your colleagues, both on committees, boards and in management, that if ever we land a recommendation with you that could be better worded to be more practical, fit for purpose, please tell us. We're giving you our best. We don't know your business as well as you do. We want to make sure it fixes the root cause, not the symptom, that it addresses, the material risk there, not window dressing. So, and also, if you get, 10 different recommendations from us in our financial audits, performance or compliance audits, and a bunch of other external reviews and internal audits, and 10 address one root cause, you can tick all 10 off at the same time. Like, what we don't like to see is people going through that checklist and missing the substance and wasting resources, because every minute that you spend, get management to spend, and I like to your advice there that you're there to protect the accountable authority, the DG or the CEO or the rest of the board or the shareholder or whether it be government or in a private business. You're there to protect them, not create work. So you're there to look at material risks rather than, be the smartest people in the room or pontificate. And when you're doing that and using the EQ, and this is, the people side is it. I think it's that ability to discern the issue so you can see the forest for the trees and really know then what you're dealing with. But look, it's my turn to take you through an update. And look, some of this, if you're avid readers of our reports, you'll know about. You've seen this graph before because I presented it at the November one and when we tabled our state audit results reports. You will have taken note that it's good news for the state sector. We had the number of qualifications. All you need to look at is the trend, really. The number of qualifications and qualified entities came off a record high. That's now 3 years in a row, moving in the right direction. We really want to keep it that way. But so congratulations to the great job that you guys are doing, because you guys really have been driving as on the boards and audit committees management's focus on these things. So too were ministers. I understand the Premier and previous Premier wrote to all ministers who about fixing this. So I think the combined efforts, and it can never be just one of us, it always takes a team working together to address these things, but that really is great. What was a challenge, and I think this shows there's still a lot of pressure on the system, and I'll talk about where we see the pressure points that we'll be focusing on in this year's financial audit season. Audit readiness last year was an issue. It was the lowest it's ever been. Only 53% of entities were audit ready with their financial statements and supporting information within 20 days of business of year end. That's the lowest ever. And the stat is that if you're not ready within 38 days of year end, you're pretty much not going to meet your statutory tabling deadlines. So, if you're not audit ready, it's an indicator that you've probably got poor quality information, you're not focused on the right things, don't have the capability in the team, and audit timeframes are compressed, and that probably means your audit costs. Either you're going to miss deadlines if you lose your spot in the queue on the schedule because we can't reschedule. Our guys are scheduled for a whole year out, and so are our contract audit firms in the main. It can add to audit costs, and you might end up with your audit report later than we agreed at planning. So there's consequences there. KPIs actually were a bit of an issue, a building issue last year, and continue to be a bit. And I think it was really the number of weaknesses that were rated as significant were higher. So keep an eye on the KPIs as well, the reliability, accuracy of information and processes that support the reporting against KPIs to an auditable quality. And think about significance as well. Relevance of KPIs. Information systems, I'll touch on it with the university sector. We tabled a report last Friday, but it's relevant for all sectors. This is a persistent, evolving thing. Our focus will never come off this now. And you touched on AI Elizabeth and I will a bit shortly, because we're going to look at it. But, you know, the cyber threat environment is only getting worse or harder to govern. So where am I pointing? Some local government reports, because even if you are not involved in the governance of a local government, you are a resident within a local government area. So, look, 9 entities last year didn't meet the statutory deadline. We tabled for the first time in an effort to encourage a little more focus on both not just meeting reporting and audit readiness, but actually finalising and wrapping up and closing the audit and arranging councils to meet to sign everything off in time before the 31 December deadline. We had 9 that didn't make it, and they made what the sector itself called our naughty list, which actually was a really great result to have only 9. It was a great improvement from the previous year, so it worked. My goal is to not have to do this report in February ever again, but you know, there might be a few years of it, but it really was great to see that focus and improvement. There were 2 reasons, I guess, in the main why local governments didn't meet the reporting deadline, and some of them were, I guess, repeat offenders. That sort of, you know, but they've been late or haven't had audits for years, haven't been able to finalise their audits for years. And I know someone in the room is affected by, is working with one of those entities. But, you know, there's ongoing systemic issues. So whether it be a poor governance culture or capability gaps that are really significant. And then there are those one-off issues, you know, not getting evaluation of a sort of a material investment in time or something. So I guess somewhere where we did see some problems was valuations, and keep an eye out or make sure people are aware of the new valuation guide that's coming out from Department of Local Government. I'm still not sure how to pronounce these new mogged names, LGERS or something. But keep an eye out for that. Our office put a huge investment of time into it, and try as we might, it's still a very lengthy document. We tried to cut it down, but there's a lot of technical detail in valuation in local government space. But that seems to be the definitive guide, and that's actually been shared nationally with other jurisdictions and been adopted pretty well from what I can understand, and gratefully received. The last point up there is in our results report, we did actually report for the first time at a whole of sector level on just the current ratio. You know, and most of us in the room know that's a really simple thing of just current assets over current liabilities. If you want to see that, it's essentially a measure of really crude measure, but a starting point for inquiry. Can you pay your debts? You've got enough cash in the bank to pay your current debts. And we had a handful of entities that had a ratio of less than 1, a number of entities with, you know, ratios of 2 and 3. But overall, we saw an average decline in the sector over recent years. We tracked it back, and you know, that does actually reveal a bit of pressure in the sector and what they've been saying publicly. You know, it sort of is grounded there. As I said, it's a starting point for inquiry. It's not the whole story with something that simple, but. You know, do need to sort of keep an eye on that sector's ability to meet its financial obligations. I think probably on the GCC stuff across local and state sector, about 60%, I think even 2/3 in the state of the information system control weaknesses were carryovers from the previous year. And so, you know, when you get a system gap, it can be difficult to address in a really timely way. Some of them are just, you know, patch your systems, do the patches regularly, and you know, in some of them within 48 hours, because when a vulnerability is identified by, say, Microsoft or another provider, it's usually, and they roll out a patch, it's usually really significant, and so you want to patch it. And my guys are still finding patches that haven't been applied, not just weeks, months, but sometimes years late. Really basic stuff, which means those systems have been vulnerable. Sometimes it's because they don't know they even have a system. It's not hooked up to, you know, the system administrator might have changed, corporate knowledge gone, and people have just forgotten to patch it. They forgot it exists. It's not on the network architecture and things. So, you know, just that's another thing, that this is part of our world and they're every day and part of our governance responsibility. New innovation, our pretty new map. So this shows you where we found, where we had audit findings across the state by local government. And we've ranked them. So the green is no audit issues. Category 4 is, sort of more higher number, more significance, and there was a weighting measure there. And we involved, once the team built that, to answer those questions, you can drill down, I think, and see what it is. But what we're wanting to do is add in the information systems findings that it doesn't yet include. But really what we wanted to do was complement, provide some more information on local government performance specifically, because, we do an audit results report at a whole of state level, and that's, if you like, one reporting entity, one legal entity, whereas each local government is a separate legal entity. And so showing those findings there is, by region, band, metro or regional, can give an insight into where problems are. You can see that it's not, this doesn't show the drill into the metro area very well, but you can see it's not just metro versus regional. And we keep getting asked that all the time when we do, say, a credit card audit in state versus local government or local government across regional and metro areas. Is it worse in the regions? The story's not that simple. Even if there are capability gaps or things, there's some really great local governments in regional areas doing really well. And some big ones in the city that should be. So yesterday we tabled the University and TAFE financial audit results report, and last Friday the General Computer Controls audit. And that was the first time we did a separate standalone report for GCC or information systems for the tertiary sector. And that's because we had some really good case studies in it. So I'd encourage you to read them. There's both good news and bad news in there, things you can learn. We de-identified the institutions because of, obviously we don't want to expose them to risk, but our information systems audit team is always identifying problems that entities aren't aware of, and they're of a material nature. And so my guys will go and plug devices in to ports and try and ethically hack. And it's only at a pretty basic level in our annual financial and audits across the sector, but it's still very effective. They find basic, important, but basic gaps. And so, again, auditors are your friend. Some of those gaps are important, but some good insights there. You might notice up on the screen the word stunning. I don't think I've ever used that in audit before. I've used, it appears to be incompetence rather than corruption. I've used shambolic. I've used sloppy, but I don't think I've ever used stunning, and it's nice to have a positive adjective. So truly, the financial audit control improvements in the universities and the TAFEs this year was stunning. There were only 14 management control weaknesses of meeting a threshold worth, putting in a management letter and reporting across the 4 universities and 5 TAFEs. It was extraordinary. So well done to that sector. I would say that they have a slightly different pay scale to the state and the local government sector. So the CFOs and their teams there, are actually demonstrating though that they're earning their keep. You can see that they're staying on top of it. So that was absolutely brilliant to reduce the financial control weaknesses by 75% year on year. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. Which, by the way, today's my 8th anniversary in the role. So, Colin, you got your leave pass just over 8 years ago. Mine is 2 to go. Not that I'm counting, and not that it is the most enormous privilege. But some days you do feel it's a bit relentless, and I will have done my time. Hand it over to the next steward. And just before I move on from TAFE and universities, we did comment on international student fee dependence. And so it ranges, I think Tim here prepared the report with 25 to 60%, Murdoch at 60%. We've got a risk there that we've been pointing out as it's been growing for all the universities in WA, and there's established metrics nationally about what is considered sort of low, medium and high risk for international student fee dependence. But we've got that trend data in those reports if you're interested. Yesterday at an MP briefing, an MP mentioned, can you break it down? Do you have the data by region for universities? And so that's something that we'll see if we can get that data to present to Parliament and the community next year to see if there's regional dependence, which we've seen the impacts of certain geopolitical things in recent times, as well as other disruption from COVID. So that's probably useful information. So what are we focusing on this year? My auditors have shared this with your CFOs and with you guys, or if you've attended the audit entry meetings around what we're looking at, public sector reform in the state agencies. It appears to be handled better. PSR 2025 seems to have been handled better than MOG 2017 in our observation. There's no real new money, but I think the lessons learned, you still have some of the experienced DGs from that 2017 experience where they knew that they were combining, say, 3 departments with no new money to combine finance systems, payroll systems, and a range of other things. But there seems to have been better project management and central guidance from the PSC and planning. So we're optimistic that we won't have those issues that I think contributed to that spike in audit qualifications. Once sort of corporate knowledge left and the band-aids fell off and people didn't know how to plug the gaps, sort of some of those problems were revealed. After those years and COVID exacerbated. But we're hoping that the learnings from those experiences, which is still fresh in the minds of many DGs, means that we will avoid the problems this time. But what I would ask, given that it accepts PSR affects financial reporting for, most state departments, there's an impact on KPIs due to transfers of functions, and there's obviously all the accounting for transfers of assets and liabilities, and including people and leave liabilities. But you've got the presentation of comparatives, you've got the PSR disclosures, and you've got control weaknesses in BAU activities. There's a lot of risk there. Some very good DGs and their audit committees have been, making sure that there's independent internal audits of these things, and we're obviously reviewing those closely. But what can you do as audit committees? Make sure that management has fully documented the PSR impacts on the entity, including the impact on financial statements and KPIs, so you can see what's changed and why, and do that logic check and ask those good questions. Not to redo what management has done, but really to, challenge. KPI exemptions, I'll get to that in a minute, but just being aware of what, I guess, BAU impacts there are of PSR is relevant. Getting to KPIs. So just making sure that any exemptions for this year, while those outcome frameworks are being sorted out, making sure that it's approved by the right approver, whether it's the treasurer or the under-treasurer. I think we've seen some basic sort of compliance stuff not being done, and that's just annoying for all of us. Just get people to check a little more closely about what's required for their entity. But sometimes KPI changes are being submitted too late for relevant endorsements, before reporting period's closed. And then sometimes, and this is something really that you can do to challenge and would be useful, is question whether those significant services and costs are being captured by KPIs. We've seen a drop-off in the number of KPIs or increase in exemptions, and then we just don't want PSR being used as an excuse or as an opportunity or perhaps an oversight to drop off some of the really core, important, significant functions and areas of spend from the KPI framework. They're there for a reason. They're an opening point, an entry point for inquiry around what's going well and what's not. And, this gets to really, for Parliament in scrutinising that the community, are we getting what we paid for from government? So keep an eye on the KPIs as well. Valuations. I'm looking forward to moving on from this as a pet topic, I have to tell you. I'm optimistic we'll get there after a pretty vocal year last year on valuations. The volatility in valuations last year caused a heck of a lot of headaches. I was pretty vocal about the Valuer General not consulting, making some changes to valuations last year on the basis of accounting standard changes, without consulting the owner of the financial framework, Treasury, the auditor of the financial framework, the OAG, or entities, their clients. And so updated valuations were landed at year end, sometimes after year end, and I think we saw, what was the figure, Tim? Did Parliament House go up 230 times? 300,000 to 30 million was the valuation. They just landed that on the Department of Parliamentary Services with no explanation. Because they changed their valuation methodology to remove market restrictions. And they did that all around town. And that's one reason, and I'm not just cranky because the office doesn't meet its KPIs for audit delivery timeliness. We're out by a few days because of that. No, seriously, it caused so much angst that with proper communication and planning and just thinking through the consequences of a change like that. So also not incorporating project planning, PPF, project planning and financing costs. Is that what PPF stands for? I keep forgetting that acronym, I think, deliberately. But that was apparently a nominal change to meet accounting requirements, which required this, but they didn't include that. So PPF is, if you're going to construct something, there's all the associated costs that can and should be capitalised. And so having regard to that in your valuations and fair value is important. And we just need consistency, that thinking through sort of what we're trying to represent here in our statements and the story here around trends and what's changed is important. AI use. Yeah, where are we going, huh? Look, we are focusing this emerging areas. So our guys are going to start this year asking, we've got data collection sheets and queries that we're just trying to get a sense of what's being used across the sector so that we can inform the Parliament to help their scrutiny of agencies and government. So we're trying to get an understanding of the extent and use of AI and an understanding of the associated risks, the potential for weak governance processes around AI, whether agencies are thinking about this at all, the over-reliance on AI outputs without proper review by management. And, if you're using it in financial reporting, which is one area, but we all know it's being used elsewhere, the integrity as well as the traceability and transparency of what's being done. In financial statements, we talk about misstatements, we talk about unreliable estimates, we talk about not being able to withstand audit challenge. But this is in every area of service delivery and operations. It's no doubt the world is getting complicated. And this is, an area that is uncertain, and we're all going to learn a heck of a lot, I think, in coming years. One of the audit partners last night shared something that one of their clients, one of our contract audit firm partners, getting a call from some AI agents that had been set up to... if I can explain this properly, I think it's worth it and I'm sure he said it was his client. It was a little bit noisy, and I was trying to hear. But and I haven't verified this, but I hope between us we can reconvene in 6 months and work out the truth of this. But I think it's worth just creating the image in your mind. 3 computers set up. The first one with AI agents. One was scanning YouTube to look at what was popular. Another one was ordering, maybe from Temu or something is the picture I had in my mind of things that would meet that popular demand. Another one was doing the marketplace. And the fourth machine was orchestrating it all and relying, I guess, on e-currency, Bitcoin or something. And he was getting emails. The guy who set this up was getting emails from that fourth machine saying, I'm running low on coin. You need to top up the coins. And he ignored those. He gets a phone call saying, I need more money. And he said, who is this? He worked out that the machine had purchased online, downloaded a SIM, got a voice synthesizer. It was going fully rogue. And he shut the whole thing down. Now, I'm going to get in contact with that audit firm partner and confirm whether that was his client or whether that was something he read about. As I say, it was noisy, but just that image in your mind, it's here. So, I think maybe we all want to head for the hills and live a simple life. But anyway, so what can audit committees do? That's really, what can we do? Ensure management has provided you with sufficient visibility over where and how AI is being used, including in financial reporting. It is being used in financial reporting. And, getting audit, accounting policy position statements and judgments, you can detect when AI is being used. You can see it. It's written too well. There's no flavour and anything that, you can tell when there hasn't been a human involved. And that's a red flag for competence and understanding the environment they're operating in, including the integrity environment. But ensure that there are robust governance frameworks for the AI tools that are approved and that there's proper monitoring and change management controls. So the basic IT governance, but change management over things. And if you've got agents operating, actually understand that, the Governance Institute put out a really good paper, I think it was just yesterday or the day before, this week anyway, around agentic AI. And, priorities to focus on, that clear accountability. Every agent has a clear owner. So if there's an agent deployed to do a particular function, like answer staff questions on your HR policies, how much leave am I entitled to, and they search your policies and give an answer, who's owning the agent? We'd guess that it's HR, but do they know that? Are they really owning it? Is it once set and forget? What are you doing about monitoring errors? How are you getting feedback on errors? How are you updating it? What happens when there's a policy change? That sort of thing. It could be helpful, but it's a whole new skill set and mindset to address this stuff. Meaningful oversight. Substantive human review at the systems level, at the output level, and defined authority boundaries. Who can do what and use what, when and how, and who's authorising it. Transparency and traceability, so that's the decisions being can be audited and explained. And then that capability uplift. How are you doing that? So if you're not a member of the Governance Institute or you haven't seen that paper, I think as members we got early access, but look out for that on agentic AI. And if you don't know what an agent is in AI, they will be used in your organisation. So go and do some research, do some reading. Okay, final areas of focus. Major projects. It may relate to comments I made earlier, but procurement probity, claims management, including robust challenger variations. Really, claims management. What happens on a major project when the claim for payment comes in from a major provider? There's really good practices around this, and I haven't seen any of them in WA. Where you get the lawyer, an independent quality surveyor, you get an independent accountant, and you get a project manager that may or may not be on the project team, and then you get project teams. For big stuff, there is best practice on this. So, to what extent are we doing it here? To what extent is it happening in your organisation? And, scaling down that model for fit for purpose is relevant. I would say we've also seen some opportunistic gouging on, in recent months, or seeking to opportunistically gouge in response to the fuel crisis. We're sort of okay for now, but with fuel on shore and supplies coming. But I really appreciate some agencies getting in touch to let us know what they were seeing around and hearing that just didn't make sense in the back of the envelope, let alone there was some pretty outrageous stuff that was coming through. And I'm pretty pleased with the response, the sensible response to challenging that. But keep alert to that. As I said, engage with curiosity if your audit team raises issues, because honestly, we might be seeing something with a different perspective across the sector that we see could be relevant. I always like us to be challenged, though, because, my auditors should be able to explain why am I looking at that. So that shows engagement with the audit process, shows you understand your business, and it helps make sure they understand the business. And I guess the extent to which we add value, it feeds into the survey results. Here are some dates here just before I get on to survey results that'll just show that we do value your input and where we're going. But 4th of December for local government, the final sitting day, so for those on state entities, your financial reporting will be brought forward a bit because the last sitting day is only the 17th of September, so I think that's the earliest one I've seen for a while. I think the 18th was last year, but it does affect a whole lot of things when you do the workflow. Thank you for your feedback. We really value your feedback through the surveys. We really take it on board. So your endorsement of our role, our independence, our credibility, is really valued. And thank you for recognising the role of the financial statement audits and the clarity of our written reports to Parliament and the value. Some of the feedback we've heard relates to broader system settings, so around policy and resourcing and cost models. So while they sit outside our remit, including who writes the framework that we audit against, we try and influence that to make it fit for purpose and do what we can. But we still appreciate that feedback, and we will feed it to where we can, if we can. So where you want more, it's engagement and communication. And yes, there's more we could do to communicate with you better. I know you want more frequent senior attendance at audit committee meetings. We really try and do that. We've got 320 entities, though, across both sectors. And you saw the map of WA. We've got them in every part of the state. We can't always get there in person. I can't always send the most senior person, particularly at crunch times. And our attendance costs money, and particularly local government, but all actually agencies are concerned about fees, as we should be as individual taxpayers. So there's the balance there. If there's selective invitations to particularly high impact meetings, please let us know, and we'd love to, attend those. We do get to most of them, but occasionally we don't, and we hear concerns. And we appreciate that feedback, so we know it's important to you. But please make sure that you understand the pressures that my guys are under, particularly at that sort of director and senior director level. Other people smell smoke. Have we put some party pies in that have burnt? They might be telling me to wrap up. I hope it's nothing more serious than that. But I will do that anyway. But look, we really recognise that there are areas where we could improve. So thank you for that, and we will do our best to address what we can in these areas. And I think, just sharing with you that from our perspective and my focus, we deliver value when we're delivering audit reports and audit insights. Those insights can be in the form of better practice guidance or those quiet conversations or forums like this, feedback to central agencies or financial framework owners. That's where we focus our core role, and then we do these add-ons, and so that's the value hierarchy for us. But, we do appreciate you identifying issues that are important to your entities, your stakeholders, so that we can raise them through various forums. So please, these opportunities are fantastic for that. So in that vein, recognising that I've gone over here, but any questions, for me directly or for Elizabeth? Come on, you've got some successes, don't you? Can you share? Come on up here, Elizabeth, and share that just before we close.
Well, Brad, I'm not sure this is quite what you were thinking of or asking, but I do think, going back to my philosophies, that we're about trying to help with guidelines, but guardrails, but not try and get in too deep. I was on an international development organisation where we had a number of guys there who really didn't trust that the CEO, who was a young woman, could actually do a job. So they line item by line item went through budget items. They pontificated about different things. So we were as low as being a $250,000 organisation. It was so tiny. And when we moved them off that, and within 3 years the organisation grew to 10 and it's now 25 million. I think that's the story of understanding what your role is in that moment in time, not a good job that you might have done elsewhere as a good accountant, etc. Your role there on the audit and risk is to provide and talk about the guardrails. So that's my good story. And it's now doing in excess of $225 million worth of work in Papua New Guinea, and is seen as the go-to organisation by the Australian government and Papua New Guinean government. So I think that's a good news story.
Very nice Elizabeth. Any burning questions for the group, or would for me? Otherwise, you can catch me out there one-on-one. Why don't we do that? Just to flag, actually, I've just was speaking to Commissioner Corboy this week and invited him and maybe his CEO and head of investigations or intelligence to come and do a Meet the CCC at our next or subsequent audit committee chair forum. So, so demystify the scariness of the CCC. Where do your referrals go? What happens to them? What are their thresholds? What are they looking at? If you find that useful, you can still come to that, Elizabeth. If you find that useful, please do come along and thank you for your attendance today. We've got some refreshments outside. I hope you can stay.